Sudden breaking news. A World War II veteran has revealed survival secrets from the Battle of the Bulge. Stories that were never meant to be told. What he says next changes everything.
I believe we're surrendering on that day. They had been completely surrounded. We only had 40 rounds of ammunition. We just didn't have the supplies, and there was no way anybody could get through to relieve those two regiments. They had no choice but to surrender.
Breaking. New documents reveal how American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne were surrounded by German forces in Bastogne, Belgium during the cold winter of 1944. For nearly a week, these men held their ground against overwhelming enemy pressure, rationing their last supplies and defending vital positions that would shape the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge. December 18, 1944. The time is just after dawn. Snow hangs heavy over the Ardennes, muffling sound and shrinking visibility to a few hundred yards. Inside and around the Belgian town of Bastogne, American soldiers, many of them paratroopers from the 101st Airborne Division, are digging foxholes into frozen earth, bracing for what frontline reports now confirm is a full German encirclement. According to after-action summaries and unit logs reviewed decades later, the first elements of the 101st began arriving late on December 17th, rushed forward from camps in France after German forces smashed through thin Allied lines. The division was ordered to hold Bastogne because it controlled 7 major roads, a logistical hub essential to any armored advance. What commanders did not know at the time was how quickly German units were closing in. By the early hours of the 18th, battalion-level reports from the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment described German infantry probing from the east near Bastogne, while armoured elements pushed from the south toward Marvy. Platoons were spread thin. Some positions were held by fewer than 30 men. Winter gear was incomplete. Ammunition stocks were already being counted round by round. At approximately 5:30 hours, radio traffic confirmed what many feared. Every major road into Bastogne had been cut. German panzer divisions, supported by artillery and infantry, had sealed the town. The Americans inside were now isolated. Soldiers from Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, reported taking up defensive positions along tree lines and village outskirts, converting barns, stone houses, and road junctions into improvised strongpoints. Engineers laid mines where possible. Riflemen stacked sandbags with frozen hands. Medics established aid stations in cellars as shelling intensified. Civilian accounts from Bastogne describe a town suddenly transformed. Windows shattered under artillery blasts. Livestock scattered. Snow-covered streets echoed with the sound of tank engines in the distance. American soldiers moved quietly between positions, conserving energy, aware that resupply was uncertain and relief unknown. German pressure increased throughout the day. Artillery rounds bracketed defensive lines. Small probing attacks tested American resolve, yet despite being surrounded, there were no orders to withdraw. Division headquarters relayed a single instruction to all units: hold the line. Analysts reviewing these documents emphasized the speed at which the situation deteriorated. Within 48 hours, a routine defensive assignment had become a siege. The men of the 101st were outnumbered, short on supplies, and facing one of Germany's last major offensives in the west. What happens next inside Bastogne? How these soldiers endure the cold, the hunger, and the constant threat of attack will determine whether the German advance stalls or breaks through. This was the opening moment of a stand that would soon echo across the entire European theatre. Stay with us as we continue uncovering how this siege unfolded, hour by hour, through newly examined wartime records. Subscribe to follow this developing historical report and the stories of the men who held Bastogne when retreat was no longer an option. As daylight faded on December 18, 1944, the reality of the situation inside Bastogne became impossible to ignore. Reports compiled from regimental logs and command summaries show that the American defenders were not simply holding a town. They were holding together a fractured line at the very center of Germany's winter offensive. The German plan, launched just 2 days earlier, relied on speed. Armored columns were expected to punch through the Ardennes, seize critical road networks, and drive west before Allied air power or reserves could react. Bastogne stood directly in the path of that plan. Every major road feeding German armor converged there, making the town a logistical prize neither side could afford to lose. Inside the perimeter, The 101st Airborne was reinforced by scattered elements of other units, including tank destroyer crews and remnants of infantry divisions pushed back during the initial breakthrough. These forces were organized hastily. Platoons that had never trained together were now sharing foxholes. Commanders reassigned sectors hour by hour as intelligence filtered in through unreliable radio links. German units surrounding Bastogne included experienced infantry divisions supported by armor and artillery. Situation maps drawn after the war show enemy pressure building from the northeast and southeast, with repeated attempts to probe American lines rather than launch an immediate full assault. German commanders appeared confident that isolation alone would force a surrender. That assumption proved wrong. Throughout the night, American patrols moved cautiously beyond the perimeter, gathering intelligence and confirming enemy positions. Small arms fire echoed through the woods as contact became more frequent. Defensive lines shifted constantly, adapting to terrain and weather. In some sectors, a single machine gun team covered entire road approaches. Supply shortages worsened. Food was rationed to minimal portions. Medical officers reported dwindling morphine and bandages. Wounded soldiers were treated in unheated buildings, often without adequate lighting. Yet morale, according to multiple first-hand accounts, remained unexpectedly steady. Officers emphasized discipline and clarity. Orders were short, direct, and repeated often. Soldiers were told exactly why Bastogne mattered and what failure would mean, not just for them, but for the broader Allied front. That understanding hardened resolve. German artillery intensified on December 19th. Shelling struck command posts and aid stations alike. Still, American lines held. Reports indicate that German forces underestimated both the cohesion of the defenders and the difficulty of coordinated attacks in snow-choked terrain. By the end of the second day of encirclement, Bastogne had become more than a tactical objective. It was now a symbol, one the Germans expected to fall quickly, and one the Americans were increasingly determined to defend. The siege was no longer a possibility. It was fully underway. By December 20th, 1944, Bastogne had settled into a grim routine defined by cold, hunger, and constant threat. Newly analyzed field reports show that German commanders, realizing the American defenders would not collapse quickly, began tightening the noose. The objective was no longer intimidation, it was exhaustion. German artillery fire became more deliberate and sustained. Instead of sporadic shelling, batteries now targeted known road junctions, command posts, and aid stations. Several buildings used as headquarters were destroyed or abandoned. Communication lines were repeatedly cut, forcing runners to carry messages through shellfire and snow-covered streets. Inside the American perimeter, sectors grew thinner. Some platoons were reduced to half strength. Frostbite cases increased daily, often forcing soldiers to choose between holding a position or seeking medical attention. According to medical logs, men frequently refused evacuation, insisting on staying with their units despite injury. The German infantry attacks began cautiously. Small assault groups probed American defenses, testing reactions and identifying weak points. These encounters were often sudden and brutal. Short bursts of gunfire in the fog, grenades tossed into foxholes, then silence. In nearly every case, the Americans held. Accounts from the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment describe one such engagement near the village of Hemrola, where a German infantry company attempted to force a breakthrough before dawn. American defenders, using overlapping rifle and machine gun fire, repelled the attack after nearly 2 hours of close combat. Ammunition was so scarce that some soldiers scavenged from the fallen to resupply their weapons. Weather played a decisive role. Thick cloud cover grounded Allied aircraft, preventing resupply and close air support. German units, operating closer to their supply lines, believed time was on their side. American commanders inside Bastogne knew that without a change in weather or a relief force, their situation would become critical. Yet discipline inside the perimeter did not break. Defensive lines were adjusted nightly. Artillery was conserved for confirmed targets. Snipers were repositioned to disrupt German movement. Engineers reinforced roadblocks using destroyed vehicles and debris. Every resource was stretched to its limit. German intelligence reports recovered after the war revealed frustration. The Americans were expected to weaken rapidly. Instead, resistance remained organized, stubborn, and coordinated. Each failed assault cost time the German offensive could not afford to lose. As December 20th drew to a close, the siege reached a turning point. German commanders prepared for stronger, more coordinated attacks. Inside Bastogne, American troops braced themselves, knowing the next phase would be more violent than anything they had faced so far. The question was no longer whether the Germans would attack again, but whether the defenders could survive what was coming next. By December 21, 1944, the siege of Bastogne entered its most dangerous phase. German commanders, having failed to break American defenses through probing attacks, shifted to sustained pressure designed to collapse the perimeter from multiple directions at once. Newly reviewed operational summaries show that coordinated assaults were now planned to overwhelm isolated sectors and force a surrender before Allied relief could arrive. Artillery bombardments began before first light. Shells struck defensive positions around Marvy, Longvilly and Neff, shaking the frozen ground and collapsing shallow foxholes. Several American positions were temporarily overrun, only to be reclaimed through counterattacks carried out by small infantry groups operating with minimal support. These actions were not part of grand maneuvers, but were the result of junior officers and non-commissioned officers making rapid decisions under fire. Inside Bastogne, conditions worsened rapidly. Food rations were reduced further. Medical supplies were nearly exhausted. Surgeons worked continuously in unheated buildings, performing amputations and emergency procedures with limited anesthesia. Wounded soldiers lay shoulder to shoulder on straw-covered floors, often refusing morphine so it could be saved for others. Despite these conditions, defensive coordination held. After-action reports emphasize how American units adapted. Artillery observers adjusted fire missions to compensate for limited ammunition. Tank destroyer crews repositioned their vehicles constantly to avoid detection and maximize impact. Infantry squads rotated positions when possible, ensuring that no single group bore the full weight of the fighting for too long. German infantry assaults intensified during daylight hours. Supported by armor and mortars, enemy units attempted to punch through road junctions critical to maintaining the American perimeter. One such attack near Marvy came dangerously close to success, with German armor advancing into close range before being halted by concentrated fire from tank destroyers and bazooka teams operating in near whiteout conditions. Civilian involvement continued quietly but decisively. Belgian residents guided American patrols through back streets and fields, warned of approaching German units, and shared what little food and shelter they had. These actions, recorded in post-war interviews, contributed directly to the defenders' ability to maintain situational awareness. Late on December 21st, a German envoy approached American lines under a flag of truce, delivering a demand for surrender. The message cited overwhelming force and the futility of continued resistance. The response from American command was brief and unambiguous. The defenders of Bastogne would not surrender. This refusal marked a psychological turning point. German commanders now faced a dilemma: continue costly assaults against a determined enemy, or divert forces needed elsewhere in the offensive. For the Americans, the decision reinforced a shared understanding. December 22, 1944 marked a shift that few inside Bastogne could yet fully grasp. After days of relentless snow and cloud cover, the skies finally began to clear. For the first time since the encirclement, American commanders could hear aircraft engines overhead. Not German, but Allied. What followed would change the course of the siege and solidify Bastogne's place in history. With improved visibility, Allied transport planes began dropping desperately needed supplies into the besieged town. Ammunition, food, medical equipment, and winter clothing fell by parachute into open fields and makeshift drop zones. Soldiers ran through the snow under intermittent shell fire to recover the crates, often dragging them back to defensive positions by hand. Medical officers later reported that these drops alone saved hundreds of lives. German forces attempted to disrupt the resupply effort, but their artillery fire proved insufficient. The defenders' morale surged. For the first time in days, soldiers ate full rations. Medics replenished bandages and plasma. Artillery units could once again respond more aggressively to enemy movements. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. At the same time, pressure from outside the perimeter began to mount. Allied ground forces advancing from the south fought their way toward Bastogne, encountering stiff resistance but steadily closing the distance. German units surrounding the town now faced a growing threat of being caught between the defenders inside and relieving forces outside. Newly examined German situation reports reveal increasing concern. What had been intended as a rapid encirclement had turned into a costly stalemate. Resources were drained, timetables were slipping. Each additional day Bastogne held disrupted the larger offensive and forced German commanders to commit units desperately needed elsewhere. Inside the town, American soldiers maintained their positions. Attacks continued, but they lacked the intensity of earlier days. Defensive lines stabilized. Patrols reported signs of German withdrawal in certain sectors. The siege, while not officially lifted, was beginning to loosen. When Allied ground forces finally broke through days later, they found exhausted but unbroken defenders. The men of the 101st Airborne and attached units had held Bastogne against overwhelming odds, not through superior numbers or equipment, but through discipline, adaptability, and resolve. Historians now agree that the stand at Bastogne played a decisive role in blunting Germany's final major offensive in the west. By denying control of the road network and delaying armored movement, the defenders bought critical time for the Allies to regain the initiative. What began as an emergency deployment became one of the most defining episodes of the war. The newly uncovered documents and testimonies do more than confirm what veterans long claimed. They reveal how close the situation came to collapse and how determination changed the outcome. Bastogne was not just held, it was defended in a way that reshaped the battle and echoed across the remainder of the campaign. If you want more real, documented World War II stories told on newly examined records and first-hand accounts, subscribe and stay with us. This was Bastogne, and there are hundreds more stories still waiting to be uncovered.